Good evening. My name is Alan Journey. I am one of the co-facilitators of Southern Oregon Climate Action Now, and I would very much like to welcome you to our program this evening on preparing for wildfire. And as I woke up this morning, I started thinking, is it a paradox or is it irony that the first day we've seen rain for months and months and months happens to be the day that we're going to talk about wildfire? And if somebody's into the etymology or whatever, you can tell me whether that's a paradox or irony. We are very excited with today's program. Before I get to it, I'll give you a couple of tips on Zoom. I should say that whilst the program is on, please remember to mute yourself. What we're going to do is at the end of the presentation, we'll have a Q&A period. But we want you to write your questions in the chat, which you should be able to see is available at the bottom of your screen. Type your questions into the box when you click on chat and then hit enter and they will be sent. And what we'll do at the end of the program is Ellie Cosgrove is going to go through the chat questions and pose the questions to our speakers. Okay. You have a choice of how you watch this. You can either, if you go to the top right-hand side of your screen, you should see a little view icon, and you can either watch side-by-side or speaker or side-by-side gallery. It's entirely up to you. It'll make no difference to the program which one you select. The presentation is being recorded as I speak. So if you want to hide your face, just put your name up there rather than having the video on. Okay. The format for this evening is the same as we always have. We have a presentation. Then we're going to have responses to questions with, as I said, from the chat with Ellie. And at the end of the program, the last 5 to 10 minutes, Kathy Conway is going to go through a quick summary of the kind of projects that are going on with SOCAN and other groups in the area that are engaged in similar kinds of activities. We will have a page on our website for links, and as the folks are going through the presentation, they will be referring to items to recommend that you have a quick look at or read. These links will be available to these on our website. So we'll give you more information about that. If you go to socan.eco/action, you will find under individual action, you'll see fire preparation, and that'll be the place to find the links for tonight's activities. It's a great thrill for us to be able to invite some, I'll have for you this evening, a couple of really good friends of SOCAN, folks that many of you may already know. From the area. From KS Wild, we have Alexi Lovechio, who is the KS Wild National Forest Organizer. Kathy and I have been working with Alexi on various projects for quite a long time now, and we know she's going to be doing a great show. And we also have a quick bait and switch for you. We did advertise Joseph Wild, who's the climate Vale, excuse me, from the Joseph Vale from KS Wild, who is the climate program director. But unfortunately, Alexi may tell you what he's doing right now up in Portland. But we've switched to somebody who is incredibly well known to anybody who spends any time in the arena of fire ecology, firefighting in Southern Oregon. Rich Fairbanks, who, as you can see, is a retired U.S. Forest Service firefighter and a local fire professional. So Rich has been very much involved in this whole arena for quite a long time, and he brings an immense area of expertise. And so I'm going to say no more and pass the baton to Alexi, who's going to start the ball rolling. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. Thanks, Alan. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. This is a pretty important topic, fire preparation. So we really appreciate you being here with us. My name is Alexi Lovechio, and I'm the National Forest Organizer with KS Wild, which is an environmental nonprofit based in Ashland. Right, so Joseph, my coworker, was originally going to be with us tonight, but he is in Portland negotiating some much needed updates to the Oregon Forest Practices Act, which affects our private forest here in Oregon. So thankfully, Rich joined us last minute. Thanks so much, Rich. So tonight, Rich and I are going to be going through content from KS Wild's Forest and Fire Toolkit. And this toolkit was created with the help from many organizations, including Rich. And so we had a lot of experts help us craft the content of this toolkit. And I'm going to go through an introduction of the toolkit and why it's important. And then Rich is going to cover defensible space and home hardening. And then I'll come back in at the end to cover emergency preparedness and funding opportunities that are available to landowners. And then, like Alan said, we will have time for questions at the end. So just a little background on the toolkit. There are two parts to it. The first part is getting to know the forest lands around you, which really focuses on, showcasing the different land managers in the area, which agency is managing what lands, and then how to get involved in the decision-making process for our public and private lands. And then the second part of the toolkit is focused on preparing for wildfire, which is what we're going to talk about today. And in this section, there's step-by-step instructions on how you and your family can prepare for wildfire. And this includes preparing your home, preparing your property, and having everything ready just in case if you have to emergency evacuate. And the toolkit compiles all the resources and information that you need to prepare and plan for wildfires. And there's a ton of resources out there. And I think this toolkit does a really good job at compiling it all and having it in one spot so you can constantly reference it and become familiar with the material. And the toolkit is available online, which is the link that's in the chat. And we also have a printed version. And it's nice to have a printed version because, having a hard copy, if the power goes out, you can't always, you won't be able to access this information. So KS Wild offers printed copies of the toolkit as well. And so why is this important? Why is fire preparation important? As some of you may know, the forests in this region are very fire adapted, and fire is an essential part of the life cycle of many of the forests in this area. And whether the fires were lightning sparked or set by indigenous peoples, fires have regularly burned through this landscape for a very long time and have really shaped the landscapes we live in. So we live very close, and some of us live on the edges of forests. So we really need to understand how to live with fire. And in addition to living in a fire-prone ecosystem, we are also experiencing climate change that is now interacting with wildfires. And the Klamath-Siskiyou region is, of course, we've all experienced it. It's getting warmer. We're seeing longer periods of drought and dry weather. And vegetation is drying out faster, which is making more of our landscape susceptible to wildfire spread. So climate change is sort of creating these conditions that is leading to more severe fire weather. And we're seeing more climate-driven wildfires that are more intense and of higher severity. So preparing ourselves is really important. And lastly, it's important because, we're seeing increasing residential development into forested lands, which is placing more homes and communities at risk to fire. Living in rural areas surrounded by forests means that we really need to prepare our homes for the chance of a wildfire coming onto our property. And most of our rural homes are built in these dense young forests where fire has been excluded from the landscape for over 100 years. And so that is putting our homes at an even higher risk of fire. And so all of these factors are creating a greater risk of wildfires potentially leading to serious impacts in our communities. And so ultimately, I think that we need to build a better relationship with fire because there is no fire-free future. Fire is always going to be with us. And so there are actions that we can take to help prevent, there's actions that we can take to prepare ourselves. We don't want to see our houses burning down to fires. And so what can we do? we can adapt to the changing climate, and we can prepare for the wildfire season. And I think the first step is just what you are all doing now, is just educating yourself and learning about the action steps that you can take to prepare, which is helping us adapt to this new normal of more fires. And so I'm going to pass it over to Rich, who's going to lead us the way and start us to talking about how we can prepare for fire, starting with our home and working outward. So Rich, I'm going to put the next slide on for you and hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Alexi. This is basically tonight I'm going to try to talk about how to make your home less part of the fuel bed when there's a wildfire. And so I'm going to kind of start with the house and move outward. As I'm sure everybody knows, just about all the buildings in the Rogue Basin here are wood frame construction. And even if they've got stucco, siding, metal roof, that kind of thing, the skeleton is still wood. And after a few years in this climate, it's very dry wood. Most houses have nowadays about 8,000 to 10,000 board feet of lumber in them, plywood and other wood products. So they are quite flammable once they get going. In Jackson and Josephine County is one study talking about wildfire risk, placed a quarter of all the homes at high risk from wildfire. And that particular study was well before the Talent fire, which I don't know if you would class that as a wildfire or as a urban conflagration. I'd be inclined to say it's more of an urban fire. But anyway, the point is, a lot of us live in or adjacent to the forest. The forests are drying out. There's no doubt about it. It's 2 degrees warmer. 2 degrees is a big deal to a Douglas fir. Anyway, next slide, please, Alexi. See if this works here. All right. This may work. Okay, so another study says that, and by the way, these are pretty authoritative. I really tried to research this stuff. The top 10 communities with the greatest cumulative housing unit exposure. Yes, we made number 1, Merlin. Not a good thing. Merlin, of course, is in the Rogue, the main canyon there. And it's also at the head of a place called Windy Creek. So you can guess one of the reasons why it made the number 1. But I think 5 of these are right here in Jackson and Josephine County. 5 of the top most exposed. And I like this particular slide. It's a little morbid, but this is a building in Paradise that I'm sure everybody thought was a metal building and therefore not flammable, until the fire came and showed them how much heat can be generated by the contents of a building, even when it's made out of metal. So next slide, please. So the basic idea here, and there's a number of websites where you can get this kind of information, is when you want to harden your home to make it less susceptible to wildfire, you're gonna look a lot at the egress that the fire might have. The main way a fire moves when it's really ripping, the kind of fire that's going to try to eat your house, is going to be driven by fairly strong winds, and the flaming front is going to generate a lot of what they call ember wash. Embers of various sizes are just flying through the air all around you. And let me tell you, very annoying. It used to land in my ears and ouch, and once in a while, if I didn't button up my shirt, there's a lot of embers in your life when you're right at the flaming front. And so that's what we're trying to do is try to keep that ember wash from taking your house. That's a big part of what we're doing. There's also radiant heat and some other things to consider, but let's go to the next slide. So we're going to start roofs and gutters. It's almost always really good to go with metal or tile. when you have to replace your roof. And I know that most 3-tab roofs, what is the plural of roof? Well, anyway, most of those 3-tab regular shingle roofs, you know, with the bituminous shingle, they last about 20 years. Some of them will give you like a 30 or even 40-year warranty, but most of them, they last about 20 years and they need to be replaced. So please, when your roof, I hope it doesn't happen to you, but when it does, you have to replace your 3-tab, think about spending not that much more money and getting a metal roof. You will not regret it. I've got one. I love it. The pine needles just slide off it, for one thing. It doesn't even have a steep pitch. And it will hold fire out for a long time. So anyway, okay, next slide, please. Vents are very important, second only to the roof. The material the roof is made out of. Oh, and by the way, if you're going to build a whole new house, if you can, build with plywood sheathing for the roof, not oriented strand board. I see these buildings going up in talent now, rebuilding, and there's a lot of oriented strand board, and the burn through time is much faster. Spend a little more money and get yourself some plywood. Sorry to digress. But anyway, back to the next vents. Everywhere that there's air coming into your house to keep it, you know, keep it circulating and keep a healthy house, you have the potential for fire to get in. And once it gets in, it'll get in between your walls, for example, where the electricians drilled a bunch of holes for the wires. And so there's all these shavings and things like that. It's very easy for fire, once it gets into the house through just a little ember, to just sit there and smolder for hours. And just when everybody thinks everything's fine, burst into flames. So your foundation vent, and especially your soffit vents, the ones in your roof, underneath your roof, they really need to be metal screened, 1/8 of an inch or smaller. And county codes are just catching up to this. So you will find that a lot of houses that were built a while back, it was illegal to have mesh that small. So it's something you ought to check. 1/8 inch or smaller is what you need for foundation vent and soffit vent. Chimneys are a little different because if you're burning, like, you know, you're heating with wood, a stove, that kind of thing, you're going to need somewhat larger so that it doesn't get fouled with creosote. But again, that's a situation where it's a tight stove at the other end. The embers aren't going to have necessarily a good home to go to. It's the foundation vents and the soffit vents that really do need to get this fireproofing to prevent the embers. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the ideal, so far anyway, the research is telling us the best thing you can have is dual pane windows. And they consist of 2 panes of glass and a space in between, and it's either air or some cases it's gas. I forget which one, argon or something. And there's a lot of times there's a desiccant to keep the moisture down. The big thing also is a lot of these windows, now pre-made windows and doors, are made with wood glazing around the thermopane. And then on the outside, it's metal. It's metal pressed onto the wood. That's very effective. Unfortunately, they're the more expensive windows systems like Pella and stuff, but that's very effective at keeping fire from getting into your house. The main way, the reason thermopane is so popular as fire prevention is the first pane heats up very rapidly and will often shatter because of the difference in temperature between the one that's being exposed to all the radiant heat of the wildfire and the part of the glass that's under glazing that isn't experiencing that heat. So that differential will cause them to shatter. But by then the inner one has usually acclimated and so it doesn't break. It gives you a much better chance. The other thing is, unfortunately for me, Smaller panes, you know, breaking up a window into numerous panes is also much safer in terms of letting a fire into your house. I unfortunately have some very large windows. They're lovely to look out of, and they're thermopane, but that is a risk. So smaller panes better than large panes. Definitely you want thermopane if at all possible. Next slide, please. Okay, now there's a couple of organizations, Fire Safe America, whatever they're called, and I think ODF does this too. They do this concentric zones where they want you to do increasingly invasive stuff to make your house less prone to getting burned up. And I think it's a great system, and I'll use it tonight. And basically, it has the zone right around your house, the first 5 feet, the bushes that are right next to your house, and that kind of thing. The intermediate zone, which goes out about 30 feet, where you don't want any dead material. You want, well, anyway. And then finally the extended, and they use 30 to 100 feet from the house. Well, I happen to live on very steep land because steep is cheap. And I wanted acreage, you know, and couldn't really afford it. But anyway, so I go all the way out, and this is, ODF does recommend this in cases of very steep land. I go all the way out to 250 feet with my treatments to keep my house safe. So, but anyway, the extended zone, 30 to 100 feet is a good place to start. And I believe we have more. Yeah, why don't you go to the next slide, please? Oh yeah, I'm jargoning again. Oregon Department of Forestry, that's ODF. And yes, call me on it because jargon will ruin your comprehension of a presentation. So apologies. Okay, so now this is an example from my very own house and home. You're gonna have to take my word. I don't have a before slide, but before, this was a nice flower bed that was full of Oregon grape. And had been in there 10, 12 years. And there was one little part of the bed that had this agave plant in it, but the rest of it was this very thick shrubbery growing right up against the house. And I know that under that stucco, there's plywood, and plywood burns. So I just got paranoid after about the 3rd year of this drought we've been having. I ripped out that Oregon grape, that was a labor of Hercules, folks, I'm telling you. Got it all out of there. Put in a couple inches of compacted 3/4 minus, not to get too technical, but gravel, and then sand, a couple inches of sand. And then I laid in these flagstones, and then you just brush the sand in between the flagstones, and you make a little area for the agave. That's what that is. An agave, the deer won't touch it. It's armed and dangerous when it comes to deer. And that's pea gravel in that bed. We don't use the bark mulch anymore. We use quarter inch minus round gravel. It's called pea gravel. It's just river gravel, sorted gravel. And it's very attractive, and it does not combine with oxygen when there's a fire. It doesn't burn. So it's wonderful stuff. And the point here is, you can look all around your house and find places in that 0 to 5 feet where there's dead material, grass and things like that, where there's, you know, your own landscaping, especially if it's a species that got waxes, fats, and oils in it. And you want to really look at that over. And by the way, if you've got a deck, again, decks inevitably go the way of all wood products. They rot, they have to be replaced. Think about nice concrete. Think about flagstone. Don't replace your wooden deck with more wood. I'm just making a suggestion here. Anyway, so that's the point. When the zone 0 is within 5 feet, you want to be super paranoid about what's there. What can combine with oxygen when there's this flaming front comes roaring up and you got all this radiant heat on your house. And again, this was Oregon grape. I couldn't stand it anymore. I'm really glad I did it. I think it's attractive. Wish I had a better photograph. Okay, all right, next please. Oh, next, oh, thank you, okay. I guess there's a lag. Anyway, okay, the intermediate zone. Now this, you're going out 30 feet from your building, and that includes, by the way, outbuildings. And you need to mow, if you got a lawn or you just got grass, you really need to mow. A good time to do that around here is like most years, is like in June. So it doesn't grow back very well, you know, right when it's curing out. And you do want it short, like 4 inches or shorter. It's amazing the flame length that grass can generate. Like an unused field with 1.5 feet of grass will give you like 7-8 feet of flame length on a windy day. So you really want to manage that. Wherever possible, you just want to have no dead material. You got little Doug firs. They've always got dead branches at the bottom. You want to just cut those off, that sort of thing. If there's anything hanging over your roof, I know it's the trees near your house give shade, which is a wonderful thing when it's 1,000,000 degrees in July. But you do want to just dial back the stuff that's hanging over your roof. And the fuel continuity is pretty important when a fire is rushing at your house. Even if it's the same tonnage of fuel that's distributed near your house, if there's something that breaks that fuel up, even temporarily, it can really change the behavior of the fire in a way that's favorable to your house's survival. So for example, these stone steps, they're bedded in gravel. Things don't really grow in that 3/4 minus gravel you use when you're doing masonry projects. So it's this 3-foot wide thing where nothing's gonna burn. And you need that. It really helps to break up the fuels a little bit, create fuel breaks, as it says in the buttons there. Let's see, what else? 30 feet. Oh yeah, everybody, I know it's really convenient to have lumber and things like that in a little pile, you know, that's fine. Just make sure that pile of flammable whatever, even those black plastic pots, needs to be away from your house. Put your outbuildings 100 feet away if you've got land, would be my advice. It just makes your life easier, and it's a lot better when the fire comes. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now this is the kind of the main way you can really manage wildfire coming at your house, is from 30 feet to 100 feet, or again, in the case of steep land, et cetera, much further, 250 is what I'm using on my place. You need to, again, if it's grass, you need to get it mowed and keep it mowed. And you need to start building some spacing between shrubs and trees and so forth. And you want to try to manage surface fuels. Why don't you give me the next one? Oh, thank you. So for example, somebody's into collage at the ODF here, the Department of Forestry. Anyway, but they're right. In the center of this slide is a perfect example. You got a shrub and then a small tree and then a larger tree. And that's exactly what fire does. I've watched it do it 1,000 times. And it climbs from that shrub, from surface fuels. That's where most fires run, is on the surface. And it'll get an opportunity like this, is illustrated in the slide, and it'll climb that bush, climb the tree, climb the bigger tree, and then you got a tree torching out, and it's throwing embers, lofting embers up into the stronger winds up above, and it's a big problem. And so the first thing you want to do is, they call it vertical spacing. I'm going to say, sorry to get nerdy here, but you want to increase the canopy base height. You want to increase the amount of distance there is between the shrubbery and the sticks and needles on the forest floor where the fire is and the crown of your trees. Around here, the main way you're going to do this, in most cases, is you're going to have Doug firs with a bunch of dead limbs down low. And you want to take a pruning saw and just gently remove those, cut them nice and flush, and pile them and burn them or chip them or whatever. But you definitely want to do that to the mostly Doug firs around your house. I do not, that's called dead pruning. It's called dead pruning, and it's very effective. I do not recommend live pruning very much in Southern Oregon because I work with Don and Ellen Goheen, the retired pathologist from the Forest Service, and I've also worked with, oh, I forget the fellow's name, the new guy, and they always regale me with tales of all the mites and midges and things like that that are attracted when you cut a live branch on a conifer around here, and probably most hardwoods. So I would definitely do a lot of dead pruning to increase your vertical spacing, or what I call increase the canopy base height. And 3 times the height of the surface fuels is the rule of thumb they're using here. Yeah, okay, if I were you around here, I would try for 12 feet. If you've got, and on average, I mean, if you've got dry mixed conifer, you're probably going to be able to get those dead limbs up 12 feet on average. And take my advice, vary it quite a bit, the height that you actually prune. Otherwise, it'll look like one of those plantations in Germany or someplace. You know, you can vary it, but your average pruning height should be pretty high. And again, dead pruning. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is what they're saying here is space your trees and shrubs out. They have several diagrams that they show how you might do that. 10 feet for trees on flat, is that 20? Yeah, 20 feet, moderate slope, 30 feet steep slope. I would suggest to you, again, if you're in mixed conifer second growth, 20 by 20 is a good start. And if you're on steeper ground or you've got some other thing that make your windy area or something like that, you might go further, but definitely start with about 20 by 20 for your larger trees. Again, I have land below my house that's as much as 50 to 60% slope. And I thin those out 30 by 30, and I do a lot of burning and a lot of surface fuel removal because land that steep burns very rapidly. It's very, very, we used to say fire burns 16 times faster uphill. I later found out that has no scientific basis, but it was a good rule of thumb to tell people. So anyway, let me see, am I on the, next slide, please. Okay, we started a little group called Prescription for Safety here in the Little Applegate. I've just got 2 minutes to tell you about it. Basically, it turns out the scientists are also working on this. They call them pods and prevent potential control lines. We were mostly interested in roads that would serve as evacuation routes. After Paradise, a lot of people died in their cars in Paradise, and we didn't want to do that in the Little Applegate. So we're trying to get we got a grant for $80,000, and we're in the process of starting to brush out roads that are going to be used as evacuation routes. It's a good thing to do. Next slide, please. And here's a close-up of the Sterling Creek Road. Runs up, yes, you can see it starts down here at Buncombe and runs up Hopkins Gulch. It turns and heads up to Jacksonville. And we are hoping to get that brushed out to the point where you can evacuate and your tires won't catch on fire when we have a big, uncontrollable fire out here in the Applegate. So that's the idea of Prescription for Safety. Is we brush out the roads. Not only do the roads identified almost always make good evacuation routes, but they're also very good places to stop a fire, good fire lines. So we feel that developing that as a regular thing, keeping our roads brushed out, would be a big help to firefighters. And I think that's the end. It's 6:35 on the nose. Do I have one more slide? No, I'm all right.
Good job,
Done.
Rich. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Rich kind of just switched gears for us a little, talking, now we're getting into the emergency preparedness. And I know this is all a lot of information, and so you can always reference the toolkit, and we can answer some questions at the end. But now we're going to switch gears to emergency preparedness. let's see. So before a wildfire, it is important to prepare yourself in your home for the possibility of having to evacuate from a wildfire. So the toolkit lays out 3 steps to emergency planning, which is making a plan, building a kit, and being informed. And so making a plan is really knowing how and where to evacuate. So knowing several different evacuations route from your home is really important, and also knowing which evacuation zone you are in. And I live in Ashland. So for example, the city of Ashland just created new evacuation zones, dividing Ashland into 10 different zones. So it's important to know which zone you live in so that if and when you have to evacuate, you know when to. And it's also a good idea before evacuating to check for road closures before you head out, because that you may have to adjust your route if there's a road closure. And so in the toolkit, there's a link for a good website on to check for road closures. And then making a plan also includes having a plan for your pets and large animals. So this includes having a go bag packed with food and medication for your animals. And, you know, if you do have to evacuate, having a temporary place that you can store, say if you have horses or something, you know, having a spot where you can have your horses go temporarily is part of that plan. So pretty much having a plan for everyone in your family is important. Building a kit is the second part, which is also, this is building your go bag. And everyone in your house should have one. It should be easily accessible. And there should be enough supplies for at least 3 days. And so some of the supplies in your bag include, again, a 3-day supply of some non-perishable food and water, a map that has marked with at least 2 evacuation routes from your home, any prescriptions or special medications you have, a change of clothing, a battery or solar powered radio is really good to have so you can stay up to date with information. And then of course, all your important documents, passport, birth certificates and everything. So we should all have our go bag packed. I know that mine is at all times. And so a pretty important part of emergency planning, I think, is being informed. So that really has to do with signing up for emergency alert notifications. And so if you're living in Jackson or Josephine County, they have this website called Citizens Alert. And so once you sign up, you can choose if you want emergency alerts sent to your home phone, to your email, or to receive text messages. And so that's really important so you're aware of what's happening. Nixle is also another emergency alert notification system that will send your cell phone text messages. And so to sign up for Nixle, you text your zip code to 888777, and then you will start receiving emergency and advisory text alerts. Also, and this is just depending on if you use Facebook or not, but by liking certain pages, so whether it's the Rogue River Siskiyou or the Oregon Department of Forestry, by liking those agencies' Facebook pages and following them, you know, those agencies are constantly sharing updates on firefighting efforts and the status of wildfires. And I think it's a great way to stay up to date on what's happening on the ground. And likewise, you can also follow whatever city or town you live in. So the city of Ashland has a Facebook page, and the Ashland Fire and Rescue has a page. So I like to follow those because they always post maps of the evacuation routes or just really good information to help you stay in the know and to receive a lot of notifications. Another part of staying up to date and receiving information about wildfires is knowing about the wildfire. So there's a few websites that you could use, but one that I like to use is called InciWeb. And it provides up-to-date information on current wildfires. On current wildfires. And so you can see this image on the left is all these red dots are active. And this is an older image, so these aren't current fires that are happening, but these red images essentially are showing you where the wildfires are. And if you're curious about one, you just click on the red triangle, and then to the right, you know, it shows an incident overview. And so in this overview, it's showing you the size of the fire, the percent containment, where the fire is, the total personnel that's working on it. And you can also see photos that firefighters are taking. And so it's just a great way to stay updated on fires. And I'm pretty sure INCIWeb is updated every day. So it has really up-to-date, accurate information. And so lastly, I want to talk about funding opportunities. And so this is going back to the extended zone that Rich was talking about. This is the zone that's furthest away from your house. It's the 30 to 100 feet or more away from your house. So if you live on a property with, say, 5 acres, all of that, whether your landscape is forested or not, it's all of that land that surrounds your house. And so if you do have a forested landscape that's around your house, there is potentially a lot of work that needs to be done. And similar to what Rich was saying, this includes pruning and limbing trees, having the correct spacing in between your trees, removing some of those accumulated fuels, whether it's like really big branches or stumps. It's just a good idea to remove that large woody debris that's on your forest floor, and whether that's pile burning or using prescribed fire if your property is ready for that. It's just a good idea to get rid of some of that accumulated fuel. And so preparing your property for wildfire can take a lot of work depending on the size of your property and your desired goals. And while some of this work can be done on your own, sometimes you may need professional help, and sometimes you may need a financial assistance, because it is a lot of time and money to create defensible space on your property. So before I get into the funding opportunities, just looking at this photo, this first image on the right, it's a very heavily forested, the trees are really skinny and there's a lot of trees. There's not great spacing. You can see there's a bunch of thin branches that are on the trees that will act as really good ladder fuel that will carry that fire to the crown of trees. And so ideally, you would want to thin some of that out and give those trees more space to grow. And so there's more water available for the trees. And again, it will make fire act a little less severe in your landscape. This middle photo, you can see that the trees are spaced. There's no ladder fuels. All the branches are trimmed down. And then you can see those 2 piles in the middle there are just some of that debris that was taken up the trees that will eventually be burned. In this third photo, the property owner created a trail on their property, which is great to have a trail on your property, but that can also be used as a fuel break. If a fire is coming through, there's just a strip of bare land that the fire will potentially stop. And then you can see that there are some piles being burned, which is, again, clearing up the forest floor. So funding opportunities, I've listed a couple here that I'm familiar with, but these are grants that will help mitigate some of the cost if you do want to do some of this work on your land. And again, these are all laid out in the toolkit with more step-by-step instructions on how to apply, but I just want to share a few with you. The first grant is with the U.S. Forest Service, and the goal is to assist landowners in developing individualized forest management plans. You have to have a minimum of 10 acres to qualify for this grant, but I think a great thing about this opportunity is that there's a 75% cost share reimbursement. So this covers a lot of the costs. The first step to looking into this grant is to call your Forest Service State Coordinator, which the number is up there and also in the toolkit. The second grant opportunity is with the NRCS, which is the National Resource Conservation Service. And this provides funding for a target-based approach to fire management, which is mostly funding mechanical treatments, not prescribed burning. So it's funding the thinning and the limbing and the piling of your trees and all the debris. And this also has a maintenance budget included, which is like, say in 5 years, a lot of the plant material is going to grow back. And so you have to go back and do some maintenance. And there's a budget that's included in this grant to go back and do some maintenance. And then lastly, Lomacotsi Restoration Project has a grant opportunity. And Lomacotsi, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit organization based in Ashland that develops and implements forest and watershed restoration projects. And Lomacotsi helps private landowners enhance wildlife habitat on property and remove hazardous fuels through ecological thinning and prescribed burning. So they do offer some burning in this grant, which I think is really wonderful because it's nice to have professionals do that work for you. And so the grants are kind of dependent on where your property is in relation to where some Lomacotsi's current projects are. So it's kind of like geographically dependent. So the first step to do is to call Omakatsi and kind of see where their projects are to see if your property qualifies to receive some funding. And they do some really, really great work. And so those are the 3 grant opportunities I want to share with everyone. Again, it's a great way to mitigate the cost of creating defensible space on your property. And that's all. I think we stopped at the right time. Thanks so much for listening. I know it was really a lot of information, but we're here to answer questions. And again, you can always reference the toolkit for more information. Okay, thanks. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much. Thank you both. I'm sure that we have a few questions in chat. I'm sure that a lot of you probably have some other questions you're formulating in your mind. So feel free to keep typing those into chat and we will try to get to those. I had a question about the toolkit. Is that available in Spanish or is it just in English right now?
Yeah, we're actually working on getting it translated. I thought it's turning out to be just a little more work that I want it to be like a quick turnaround and to have it ready, but it's taking a little more formatting and just we have to kind of cut back some of the a lot of the text that we have, but that is coming soon. And KS Wild will be doing a push on that once we have the Spanish toolkit available.
Excellent. That's great. Kathy had a question about in town, should we be spacing our houses further apart than, and particularly as we're probably rebuilding some of these areas in the Phoenix Talent area, should we be doing that? And do you know, maybe is there any action to be done to try not to have those homes so close together in town?
Rich, you want to step in on this one?
I really think it would behoove the communities in the Rogue Basin to look at their entire suite of zoning and building codes. It's so obvious, I think anyway, after Paradise and now Talent, that these little wood frame towns are very vulnerable. It's a drier world right now and a hotter, drier world. And yeah, I think we ought to do it. We also ought to do it at the county level, zoning and building codes for the whole county. California has adopted codes that are much more advanced, much more science-based than anything we've got. And it's just something that's, I think, long overdue in Oregon to take a look at that.
Definitely. And along those lines, also thinking about what happened with the Alameda fire, how can we adjust these defensible space practices into town?
Go ahead, Alexi.
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
Yeah, thinking about what happened with the Alameda fire, how do we kind of put these practices, and maybe are there any kind of adjustments for people who are living in town and maybe are, you know, they're living really close to another house? And
yeah, I mean, I live in Ashland and I have started to just do exactly what, you know, Rich was saying with my 0 to 5 zone. Like, I know that I don't live on the forest edge, but I think that there's many things that I can do just to fireproof my house, like clearing out all my gutters with the leaves and pine needles, just really making sure I'm doing my due diligence and like raking out underneath my deck, moving. I have a lot of wood like stumps around my yard for some reason, so I just moved them away from the immediate vicinity of my house. So I think for me personally is what I've been doing is just trying to create that defensible space around my home, and hoping that, and my neighbor, and I've talked to my neighbors too, and they're pretty serious about doing that too. So I think talking to your neighbors and maybe starting that conversation about we should all be creating defensible space, just so, you know, I can do it, but it really depends if my neighbors are doing it. Because embers can fly pretty far. So I would suggest just talking to your neighbors and making sure you're doing defensible space around your home.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really key point. Quick clarifying question for Rich about when you're talking about brushing out those roads in Applegate. Did you mean by that, did you mean clearing the brush away from a road?
Yeah, yes. And also pruning and thinning, not commercial thinning. I'm talking little skinny half dead fir trees along the roads. You're just changing the fuel profile so that the forest is more open and there's less fuel on the ground. And I use that shorthand brushing out. And it's more complicated than that, but it's all really solid science that we base it on. And everything we do is in consultation with silviculturists, botanists. You know, we're dealing with landscapes that have already been heavily altered. You know, these roads have been there for 100 more years. So what we're talking about is just thinning and pruning along the second growth. Yeah.
Great. What are some alternatives to wood frame buildings?
Well, I definitely think what they call cob construction is far less flammable. There's also a concrete method that involves, I can't remember the name of it. Somebody help me out, but there are alternatives. The biggest single thing though is cob, what they used to call straw bale. And the implication is straw, well, that burns. No, this is what it really is a way of building basically out of stucco and plaster. It's very fire safe, or that's the preliminary data, is very fire safe.
Yeah, that's really great. That's good information. Do you know of a free trailer service available to pick up chopped up vegetation instead of burning it or kind of piling it up and waiting for a while to burn?
I don't
either, but I do remember seeing signs that the city was doing like a free drop off somewhere, the city of Ashland. But I don't recall who was doing it. So maybe look out for what your city is doing, because I know that Ashland did it last year.
Right.
Yeah,
and
the
if
fact
anybody,
that we don't have, oh, sorry.
Oh no, go ahead.
Yeah, the fact that we don't have a municipal or county-based yard where you could take stuff and have it. Lane County has this system where you take stuff in, they grind it up, they compost it. They got a big tub grinder, they compost it, they turn it into really nice, you know, garden stuff and sell it. Or if you are the one who brought in stuff, you get it for free, the stuff that's been cooked and composted. So they got a really nice system. It would work really well in Southern Oregon because we do have a fuel problem. So just saying.
Yeah, definitely. And if anybody else, if you're in here and you kind of know of some resources that you'd like to share, there are some resources being shared in the chat. So feel free to post those in there and we can put those up on our website later so that everybody has access to those. Is it safe to use battery operated equipment to help trim vegetation on your property?
Is that for me? Last I heard, ODF was saying a battery operated chainsaw, that's the only example I know of. They put it in the same classification. They're pretty strict about that because I guess it can generate sparks.
And is it safe to use a tractor on your land if you don't have tall, dry grass?
I would imagine so. You know, ODF has a really good set of rules that's real transparent on their website, and they're pretty complicated. So I'm going to send the person there I'm gonna check it out there.
Okay, yeah, it sounds like that's a really good resource. Does anyone know of a business that rents goats to help trim down your vegetation? This might be a good one for the group.
Just anecdotally, not really helping answer the question, but I saw a presentation by a person who herded goats up onto a chunk of chaparral, and it was really amazing what a herd of goats will do to a place that they were trying to change. It was a rancher who was trying to change it from chaparral to grassland, right? Because cows eat grass, you know, and you can get money for a cow. But anyway, the goats really were very effective. Get this, they watered them. There's like 100 goats in this herd. They water them real good in the morning, and then they put them up on the chaparral, this dry chaparral hillside. And while they're eating, they're all peeing. Sorry, but you know, and it actually adds to the soil moisture. These people had this all worked out. They did a wonderful presentation, and for lunch, guess what stew they had? Yes, goat stew. It wasn't bad, guys. I'm serious. It was pretty good. So anyway, that's the total universe of my knowledge of goats. They do eat chaparral like nobody's business. So.
That's great. Super great. Need some more goats. Well, I am going to turn things over in just a second to Kathy because we do need to wrap this up. But I did want to address, there is a couple questions that have come up about the Nixle alert system. So Alexi, maybe could you quickly just kind of explain where, if everybody in the Rogue Valley, if that's helpful for them to sign up for that, or if you know any more about that?
Yes, well, Charisse just helped me through this in the chat. So I thought it's a national program. But your city or your municipality has to subscribe to Nixle. So I know that Ashland has a subscription with Nixle. So me living in Ashland, I'll receive those notifications, but I don't know if, say, Jacksonville or Medford. I'm sure Medford does. But so yes, your town has to subscribe to it in order for it to work, is now my understanding. Thanks to Charisse for clarifying that.
All right, thank you for clarifying. Great. All right, go ahead, Kathy.
Well, thank you for that very informative presentation. And I think we have some unanswered questions. And at the end, I'll comment that an email went out with a request for feedback. If you ask questions in that and include your email address, we'll get back to you individually. But we'll also try to put some of these things on the fire preparation page that we've created for this event. So if you go to socan.eco/action, and then under the individual action column, the page is fire preparation, and we'll add some of the answers to that page as well. So my task is to share with you things that SOCAN is working on right now and invite you to join us. Everything I'm talking about is on the SOCAN calendar, which is socan.eco/events. So if you miss any details, if you just go there, you'll be able to see the locations and the links and things like that. So SOCAN has 5 programs, and those are in the center on this graphic. And then within each of those, we have different projects. And so the program areas are government, natural resources, transportation, community engagement, and education. So looking within the government program, the federal and state project will meet on Monday, August 9th. And they will have joining them Colin McConaughey, who is the manager for the greenhouse gas programs with DEQ. So that's kind of a special thing to be able to have him participating in that meeting. The also government program, Ashland Climate Action Project, is having a Zoom conversation on Thursday, August 19th at 7. The topic is Rethinking Streets, Lessons for Ashland. The County and City Project is a new project, and it will meet on Thursday, August 26th. And that group is looking at different projects and what they want to focus on. And so that meeting will be narrowing down to a few specific projects. Under Natural Resources Program, the Forest and Fire Project meets on Wednesday, August 18th, and the details for that one are on the calendar. SoCan at Mountain Meadows is one of the projects under the Community Engagement Program, and that group is back meeting in person. It meets at Mountain Meadows in the Jefferson Room, and we ask if you've not been vaccinated, please make sure you wear a mask. Coastal SoCan has monthly meetings, and the meeting in August is going to be on climate action, federal and state perspectives. Coastal SoCan is doing a hybrid where they meet in person at on the Curry campus, but also they have it on Zoom. So you could pick it up if you don't want to make a trip to the coast, you could pick it up on Zoom. Our next monthly meeting for SoCan will be on Tuesday, August 31st. It will be a Zoom meeting, and the plan is that the focus will be on climate change and species of conservation concern. We haven't confirmed our speakers yet, but we're working on that and looking forward to that topic. Another community engagement program is Businesses Taking Action, and the different businesses are on the website. We encourage you to support them and also ask other businesses if they're taking action and they would like to complete the form that we have for people to do. Under the education program, the Master Climate Protector course is offered once a year. It's a 10-week course, meets weekly for 3 hours. And the next course will start in February 2022. You can contact Ellie for more information, or on the website, if you sign up, that just gets you more information at this point. We have other projects in each of the program areas that don't currently have meetings scheduled, but if you're interested, there are people to contact about those different projects. And among other groups, ROCPAC, which is Rural Oregon Climate Political Action Committee, is our voice on climate action. And Hogan Shiro is the person who leads that. And we encourage you to explore that if you are not aware of the work that they're doing to help us in the legislature. So a big thanks to Alexi and to Rich for tonight's presentation and sharing this valuable resource with us. And a special thanks to Rich for stepping in and helping us understand. We know you have incredible experience in this area. Thanks also to Ellie for helping us with the Q&A. It really helps to have a person there who's watching that. And thanks to all of you for joining us. It's really important as we try to learn more about what we can do that we increase our preparation for wildfires, no matter where you live and what your skills are, to be aware of things and share with other people. There's some people who don't know, they haven't had an opportunity to hear this information. So please consider sharing with them. And I'd like to stress the importance of, as we look specifically at fire or at the weather and things that are happening, all of these are happening because of climate change. So as we look at specific things and deal with them, we need to keep sight of the bigger issue. What can we do to reduce our impact on the planet and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions so that we maybe can change this so we're not having to deal with such intense fires or other issues. So reminding you not to lose sight of the climate change issue, the bigger picture. As I mentioned earlier, an email was sent to you with a follow-up survey. If you would take time to fill that out, it's very helpful to us. I think you can do that in less than 5 minutes. SOCAN website is at socan.eco. Questions, info@socan.eco. And if you're able, please consider giving a donation to help the climate movement keep going. socan.eco/donate. And I'd like to say again, thank you to our speakers, people who helped put this program together, and thanks to all of you for being here this evening. Appreciate it greatly.